Welcome to Digital Design Lab Online. My name is Jessica. I just graduated from CalArts this year, and I'm going to be walking you through the basics of using Illustrator and InDesign. I want to preface this video by saying that everyone comes into the program with different skill sets. Some of you are probably already Adobe pros, some of you may not have ever touched the software at all. Both are totally fine. I came into the program having never used Illustrator, and here I am, like, literally making tutorial videos for Illustrator. Either way, I ask that you watch through these videos. There are specific tips set up for these projects that you're going to be doing in this class, like setting up the files and printing out the files, and I ask that you watch through them to learn those things, and you might learn something new as well. I also want to say that there are like 100 ways to do anything in these programs. So if you do something differently but get to the same end goal, do it the way you're comfortable with. And if you have any questions, of course, get to know your classmates. Even if you can't see them in person, it's good to get to know them because eventually you will meet, and ask them, what kind of moves they know, what kind of special tips they have. And of course, Google, YouTube, and your wonderful TAs will always be really great resources. So if you have any questions, make sure you ask somebody or Google it. So that's basically it for introductions, and let's get into our first tutorial. We're going to start by going to the top left corner and hitting File, and then hit New or Command N, which is the shortcut. This will prompt your new document window, and we will go through this step by step. So the first thing you may notice is that there's a lot of preset sizes in the new document page. So between mobile, print, web, there are a bunch of already existing sizes that you can use. I would recommend you get comfortable with letter and tabloid, which are the two sizes of paper you will be using the most to print. Over here at the preset details, you are able to set up a name for your document. You can name your document whatever you want, but I would always recommend labeling it with the project you are doing so it doesn't get lost. Next, we're going to be talking about setting up the size of your document. So over here, you can see there is the width and height of your artboard. The good thing about Illustrator and most Adobe software is that you can actually switch between units really easily. So for example, I'm just going to go ahead and type in 800 pixels, and if I hit enter, it automatically converts it to inches. This is just handy so you don't have to do unit conversions. So next we're going to put in our dimensions that we got in the syllabus, but to set up our postcards properly, we're going to actually double the height of the postcard, and I will explain that a little bit more in depth later. But first we're going to put 6 inches for our width and 8.5 inches for the height. The reason we do this is because double-sided printing is really inconsistent, and usually there will be a large margin of error. So if we double the height, we're able to fold over our design and get a double-sided print that is more accurate than actual double printing. So here you can adjust the amount of artboards you have, which is just how many of these 6 by 8.5 documents you will have in your workspace. You can always change how many you want, and I will show you how to do that today, but we're going to start with 1. Next up is bleed, which is basically an extra bit of print that will be trimmed off in your final print. This is so when you trim your postcards, there won't be like a little sliver of white where the print didn't cover. There's no need for like a huge bleed, especially when you're working on a project so small, so we're just going to keep it at the smallest option. Next up are color modes, which are perhaps the most important thing for you to learn. As a graphic designer, color modes are going to be things that you work with very often, and you need to understand the difference between them. So, RGB is made up of red, green, and blue. These are the colors that your monitor or your screen has and produces white light when they mix all of them together. CMYK on the other side is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. These are the colors that a printer will normally have to print out every single color of the spectrum. So in short, you basically want to use RGB whenever you're designing for a screen. So like if you're doing social media assets or motion or web or that kind of thing, and you want to use CMYK whenever you're designing for print. So for like books, posters, that kind of thing. RGB has a larger range of colors because it is light instead of actual ink. So you always want to make sure your print stuff is in the right color spectrum, or when you print it, it might look completely different than what it looks like on a screen. There also are exceptions. For example, the wide format printer prints in RGB because it doesn't actually use CMYK ink. It uses a larger range of inks. When you're working with a professional printer, they will usually tell you which mode to work in, so no worries about that. So because our postcards are eventually going to be printed, we will be working in CMYK. For raster effects, just keep it at 300 ppi. It's always easier to size down after you create your document than it is to size up. So I would always recommend you to work in high or 300 ppi. Next, you can just leave default as the preview mode and you can hit create. Okay, so you should be prompted with something that looks just like this. If you've never used Illustrator before, this white space is your artboard or your workspace, and the red line around it is the bleed. So like what I was saying earlier, basically with the bleed, if you have an element that goes over the white workspace and goes into the bleed, not only is the black part that is overlapping with the white will print, but also the part that is overlapping or reaches the red. However, if you extend past the red line, that area will not print. I hope this makes sense. It's basically just so when you actually trim your postcards, you won't have like a little white sliver of human error. The color will reach all the way to the edge. This will probably make more sense when you actually print it out and see it in person. But for now, just stick with it. Just make the bleed. It will make sense eventually. So I'm just going to delete this box and then talk more broadly about Illustrator in general, especially for those who have never used Illustrator. So you may notice that your Illustrator setup might look a little different from mine. Everybody has kind of a different workspace, and it's really important for you to create one that you're comfortable with. So if you go into the top right corner and click this little dialog, I think most illustrators come as essentials, but you can always change whatever workspace to match what you're doing. So for example, if you're doing a lot of illustration and painting work, select the painting one. It has all the tools you need for that. I like to work specifically in the typography one since I think it's closest and matches my needs the most. I always adjust things. I delete windows and tools that I don't need. It's just like make a space that is comfortable for you because you are the only person working in it. Illustrator has a really nice customizable workspace, so I highly recommend you like flip through some of these tools, or as you see what you tend to use more, customize it so it's always there for you. You can open up these panels, you can really move them around and see what everything is. So make sure you're taking advantage of that. Like you can flip through all these things and, take them out of the actual panels and move things to places that they are the most comfortable. The last thing you want to do is spend all your time designing looking for the tool you're trying to use. Additionally, if you select certain tools like the type tool, there are additional options that show up on the top of the page. The gradient tool does as well. A lot of the tools do not have any excess options, but just make sure that you're looking at the top of the screen as well. So next, if you're ever looking for a specific tool, go on the top of the page, hit Window, and all the different panels are located here. So if you're ever looking for like stroke, you can click it there and it'll pop up and show you exactly where it is. You can also search for things. Sometimes this is kind of slow just because it has to actually look through the entire software. So you can see I'm trying to click it, I'm getting the rainbow circle of hell. So leave this as sort of a last resort kind of thing if you really can't find something. In the next part of this video, we will be discussing a few more things to get your file ready to start designing your postcards. So make sure you hop over to part 2.